everybody, and sorry for the hassle. I was taken to the wrong place, but luckily I found with everybody's help here. So today we're going to do a few things. I'm here because I've heard quite many of you might have problems in finding a game idea, making that game idea into an actual game, having too much content coming up, all these kind of typical problems. So we'll go through those. So we're going to be doing 3 things today. I'll first give you an insight on like typical things I've learned while doing games from game design perspective. Then we'll work on your game design canvases, and after lunch we will do something exciting, which will take you to the very deep core of how games are done. Here's a little background from me. I worked with about 100, also more published games. I've stopped counting. I received about 30 industry awards. I did build the biggest game education for Finland for Metropolia. I've created game design canvas, which we'll see today. Then there's Bit1 student competition, which I created. While building this game education, I saw there was a lot of talented students. At the same time, I would go to the Finnish Game Awards and hear people from the industry say, like, we're lacking talent. So there was definitely a gap there. So I started Bit1 competition, and now it's part of the Finnish Game Awards yearly. So these same people now see the talent in the students. I've done a lot of international mentoring during lecturing, like today. I've been a game programmer, designer, lately manager, worked in companies like Housemarque, Digital Chocolate, Kuosema, and latest as Playstack, which is the publisher of Ballatra. People don't usually know Playstack, but they know Ballatra. So I'm the general manager for the Helsinki studio, and I do discovery. And I've started education, which is providing game education in various formats. But to give some idea on how I see things, I think games is the only reasonable thing you can do with computers, right? And another thing all game developers should always remember, if reality would be fun, well, fun enough, we wouldn't be making games, right? That's what's brought us here. But at the same time, you could say, quite often I see developers in trouble because they're trying to emulate the real life. And that's very difficult, but also maybe not so much fun. So it results in trouble. So after doing, as a designer, I worked on like tens and tens of games, and I started seeing some patterns happening. Games are about collecting, construction, exploration, socialization. People on the same game might have different reasonings, but they all have some reason why they are in the game, which has brought them to the game. So this is something you should understand. What kind of audience are you looking to serve? What do you expect them to want to do in your game? And then serve them as well as possible. Then also when doing those games, I started seeing these components or these parts that the game is done of. And I'll actually share this later so you can all get this. But like these are kind of the parts that are moving in the game production-wise. So you need to have these covered. And from a design perspective, like if you change the theme, it will affect story, which will affect the content amount, which will affect the user interface, and the visuals will change, and so on. So either end of these boxes you go and change will affect the other end of it. So kind of to understand the extent of what a simple change somewhere might actually cause. And today we'll, because you're going to be going to a game jam, which is a lot about ideas, to talk about ideas, I also noticed that ideas tend to categorize in 3 different types. One is you come up with the mechanics. So you have the mechanics, which is great. You might have the theme, okay, let's make a car manufacturing plant simulation. Or you have the story, we'll tell the story about the kid getting from rags to riches. But what's typical here, that you usually have one of these. You might have 2, but you don't have 3. So you might, of course, question, do you need a story? I always think there should be some story, at least the background story, to give context and like meaningful approaches in the game design. But anyways, what I want to say here is like, if you come up with the mechanics, you just then think of the theme and then of the story. And quite often people, when they think of the theme is like pirates, zombies, space, the first one that comes to their mind, and not really playing around with that theme or trying different themes. And a good theme, how to recognize it, is something after you try that one and put it in, it won't come off. You can't change it anymore. It will explain everything in the game and everything makes sense. So it's really important in that sense. Also, quite often when I see concepts of games, they might have the idea described. The goal of what to do might not be clear. Well, if the goal is there, then the challenge of the game isn't really thought out. So what might happen is that the challenge becomes quite repetitive or doesn't hit your target group, that kind of things. And the goal, challenge, reward is, I'd say, is the basic loop of any game. And to visualize that, I created this. So when you see a game the first time, you pretty much always ask, like, what is this game about? You see it in the store, you're going to go and like, what is this game about? If you don't get answered, you'll go to the next game. If you get answered, then you're going to ask, like, okay, how do I play this? What is this game about? Again, if you don't get answered, you'll go to the next game, and so on. But once you start the game, you should first have a clear understanding, what is the goal in the game? What should I be doing? If you don't get this, again, you'll exit the game, right? Once you get your goal, there should be some challenge there. So let's say we have this zombie game and there's a house, and your first goal is to go and clear the house, meaning you need to go and enter the house, you need to clear it of zombies. And okay, now you know your goal. Then the next thing is like, is there a challenge to that? So maybe the challenge is to finding the guns or how to do that. Once you do that and the house is clear, you should be rewarded, given a satisfaction. And in many games, these are like in Half-Life, when you, in the very beginning, you break some boxes to unreveal a corridor. That is actually a reward, because you get forward and you see more places to go, and you might get a gun and a crowbar and so on. But these are the rewards that keep you going. So as a simple rule of thumb, whenever the player does what you want them to do, go and reward them. And you can never reward too much. But then so now you cleared the first house, then you might see there's another house on top of the hill, there's a little girl on the second floor. Your goal is to go and rescue her. And so on and so on and so on. So this is the loop where you get into. And once this loop works, that is how the player gets engaged and keeps continuing the game. And at some point, you're going to ask, like, why am I doing this? And I think a good example for these are all the first-person shooters, where you do that for a while, then very shortly you're going to start wondering, like, why am I doing this? What's the point in this? If it is a first-person shooter, it is very repetitive. But this is usually where the storyline comes in, and the storyline might be on the level like, go and save the planet, save the world. And that gives you the reasoning, and that gives you the long-term goal to go and continue the game forward. But as a game designer, as a publisher, because I do discovery on games and all these aspects, some questions when I'm presented with games are like, what is the goal, what is the challenge, and then also what is unique. So, because when you go to the store, you're looking to find that what text, and the thing behind that is you want to know what is unique about this game. Is this something new I haven't experienced yet? Is there something that's really interesting to me? And that is really important, especially from the publishing perspective, because there's no point in publishing games that have been done already, especially if they're well done and they sell already. There needs to be some angle to it, always. Then in all the game productions, this is a very difficult thing, and this is what we're going to practice on the afternoon. What is the core? And quite often, even in the team, people might have a different understanding what the core is, which means people are making a different game, which means they're prioritizing different things, which means they are not aligned on their understanding what the game is. And as small as you can make this, like one sentence, the better. That will help you a lot. Then after like passing all these points, and so the goal is clear, the challenge is clear, there's something unique in there, and you start playing the actual game, there should be variation in the core gameplay. So often when people pitch me games, my question is like, how will the game evolve? So the basic gameplay is there, but then my next concern is like, will it actually variate well enough on that sense? Think about like Candy Crush, which has like more than 1,000 levels. How did they variate that kind of things? Risk and reward, as a game design perspective, is pretty important. And this is one of the ways, quite effective way of bringing out the challenge in the game. So here's an example from game design perspective. So let's say you have this road and you can go either to the left cage or the right cage, and you see what's in those. As a game designer, you have some amount of health, some amount of money, and you can place monsters and money in the caves. And now the question is like, which one of these would you do from game design perspective? Anybody? D? I heard D. Any other choices?
Well, F also works because you have 2 boxes of gold. There's more risk.
Sorry, which one?
F.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying F good or?
I think so, because you get more gold, but then you have to fight the zombies.
From game design perspective, the only viable option is E. In D, why would you ever go to the cage which has monsters? What do you gain out of that? Nothing. In F, you would always go to the cave with money. So think of these if you put this in a series. So in that case, you will never go to the right one in D, because it will always be monsters, you lose health until you die. In F, you would just get money and there's no real challenge there. But in E, the other one has 1 bag of money, 1 monster, where the other one has many bags of money and many monsters, which means you can choose how big of a risk you take, and the reward of the amount of money will be accordingly. So if you're low on health, you probably take the one on the left. If you're confident and or you need a lot of money, you'd probably go to the E. But the player would then accept whatever happens because it was the player's choice on which cave they took. And this is kind of like what's also like the Sid Meier's series of interesting choices. If you put lots of E's in a row, it kind of makes sense. Well, this is a very rough level example, but it would make sense for the player. Then there's the learning curve. So you might have everything well, but you haven't adjusted your learning curve to your target group. So that's the one thing also to understand, who is your target group. For everybody, it's not a target group. And typical issues might be you make it too hard because you play it every day, or you make it too low when it doesn't hit your target audience. Also, you should notice it's not a straight line, so it does variate. It's kind of like in movies. They start with a chase, then you catch your breath, then there's another chase, and so on. It's kind of similar. Well, a lot of this is to do with problems. There's some common problems that keep arising everywhere. I've been in Asia, I've been into Arabic countries, and so on and so on, and the problems are the same. And the biggest problem that keeps coming up is the communication. And this is with the team. So let's say you have this brilliant idea. How do you communicate that to others? So that is one of the talent things for game designers or any developers, to communicate that in a form that others understand it in the way you mean it. But then also you need to do the same for the players. So often I see teams struggling like, players just drop out of the game. And it is usually to do with this understanding. The players don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. Simple things like this. In production teams, I always recommend to have 2 channels. One is like the small channel, which is where you say everything. You can talk about the weather and what your dog did today. But then you have the big channel, which is separate from that, and that is where you put everything decided on record, and it has nothing else, so you can easily find those. This is also something I do in productions, so I haven't seen this in any like Scrum or Agile things, but I think for games this works very well. So every time somebody starts working on something new, we make a presentation of that on what should be done. Once again, just to recap that. The second problem is, it is a bit about the communication, but it is the understandability. So kind of like, let's say, when your boat leaves the harbor, which means when the player starts playing the game, you will just get holes in the boat until it sinks. And those holes come from people not understanding what to do. And that's a very easy way to lose your players. Here's an example of one game I saw at Aalto University, and they were wondering that nobody's playing their game. And the starting position was that the player was standing on the rock, looking at the sea, and they wanted the player to go to the house. And this is a general example I do in the game design courses, where everybody needs to come up with 5 ways on how to take the player to the house. And there's many ways, like you could have a storm in the sea, or there's rain on the places you don't want to go. There can be a path on the ground. There can be a sign saying, go to the house. There can be an arrow pointing to the house and the door. There can be light coming from the house. There can be music. There can be text on the top of the screen. There can be a fence around the player, blocking from going anywhere else. And we could turn the player to look at the house, kind of things. Just an example of how the visual language or the setting can make a big difference. But like, what, how, and why are the questions the players will ask, so when they start the game. And you need to think on how you're going to answer these. And sometimes designers think they're clever, more clever than the players, and they feel even shy or embarrassed on guiding too much because they think that shows their game isn't perfect. But no game is perfect. You can never, I'd say, rather guide too much, embarrassingly too much, just to ensure those players get in. Because it is a quite big difference if you get 70% of the players to complete the tutorial compared to 20%. And you should ask yourself always, at this point, what information does the player need to know? So that information should be always visible and available. So it is a question on being on the player's side. So help the player. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. Quite often I hear people like, okay, that's a problem. Let's put it in the text. But nobody reads the text. You can't rely on that. So the way to fix that needs to be something else. And the other thing I hear, okay, let's put it in the tutorial. Quite many players want to skip the tutorial. So these are 2 big problems. And if you think of Angry Birds, and you take any screenshots of Angry Birds, I'd argue that people know just from the screenshots, seeing the visuals there, on what to do in this game. They understand it's a game. There's a slingshot on the other end with something round, like a rock, and there's things on the other side which looks like they're going to just collapse at any moment. So you kind of understand, like, okay, getting that thing from the slingshot to these breakable things will make things happen. And then you don't need any tutorial or any text to explain that. The visuals and the game setting does that. And this is, again, where the theme comes in. And the theme can help on this when you have the right theme. Not sure how often I see in game productions like outlining like how much time we're going to use on positive feedback or supporting the player. This should always be like one part of the production plan, just the reserved time that we get things right for the player. Another thing in teams, and I expect that in Game Jam, you might be looking to focus on making a lot like, different kind of trees. But rather than having 100 different trees, which all are static and do nothing different, I'd have just one functional item which does something. So I'd always prefer those. Then the uniqueness. So this is very important. Like I said, from the publishing point of view, commercial point, if you look at the startup, you should have a unique selling point. And this shouldn't be just anything. This should be something you can explain and others can understand, but you should actually lose your sleep about it. And even better if the publisher can't sleep about it after hearing about it. Something that happens also often is like you put everything there. You have a new idea, you have a new mechanics, you're going to make the UI new, you're going to make the text reading approach new, you're going to just change everything. So there's going to be nothing conventional there. And these kind of games have a bit of a problem because not only does the, let's say publisher have to understand just the UI function, let's say, and the gameplay, there's so much to grasp. So in these cases, it's the best to have just that new innovation in the gameplay, and everything else can rely on the conventional approaches, making it easier to identify the new stuff and getting into that. So in that way, the innovation can be friend or enemy. I did that. I came up with an idea, then I thought the UI in a new way. I thought everything in a new way, and then it became really complex. So I learned it the hard way. Also in the game ideas, people love complex structures and complex environments, but quite often, especially on the mobile games we did, simplicity was really important. And a good way to test simplicity is to write a help text for it. If you can't write it in 2 sentences, it's too complex. That's what we learned on those. Then the target group. So like I said, it can't be everybody. It needs to be some specific target group. Is it going to be males from US 30s to 40s? Or is it going to be something else? So this is something to really think about. And you can have a few target groups. You can make a profile of persons in that target group. And to start with that. Theme. So like I said, theme is something like people don't usually utilize that well. And they go with the easiest one. So this is definitely something where there's a lot of room to play around. So I would urge every one of you, when you come up with a game idea and you have a theme to it, try other ones. Try the ones you think won't fit. That can also teach you something about the game. Storyline, like I said, I'm a big fan of storyline. And so whenever possible, I include a storyline. It might not always be visible, it might be just one intro box in the very beginning, but even that can explain the game world and why the items in the game world are as they are, kind of things. And games are a lot about emotions, on bringing those out. And this is so actually next time you play a game, when you start the game, you could have a paper next to you and a pen and write down all the emotions you go through. There's actually quite a lot of those, including things like frustration sometimes. But these are something also you should keep in mind, like which emotions will I be aiming for and targeting for. And while working at Digital Chocolate, which actually all the Supercell founders were there, and with them this was our key thing. It always needs to be fun, and we need to be dead honest about the game. Is it still fun? And if it wasn't fun, then we had big problems. So out of all these learnings, I've while teaching, I started with having a 2-pager. People would write their concept there. Then I heard about business model canvas, and I was asked, could that be applied for game design? And I thought, like, well, yes. And this is what came out of it. And this is something I believe you've been handed out. But this is a very efficient tool for outlining your game idea and getting feedback. So I've seen people like in 20 minutes outlining their huge game just here, and then handing it forward and getting feedback already in a minute or so. So this is amazingly efficient. If you look on a bit closer, the green line on the top is actually your pitch. So it is about I'm making a PC game where the zombies are taking over the world. Your mechanics is a traditional first-person shooter. We have a flamethrower, which is our unique thing. The meta game is like freeing one village at a time. These are the things you usually need to talk about with publishers. And the blue one is your target and market. So like who you're making this for, the target group. And very important is the market research. So don't go meeting a publisher without doing the market research, because they're going to tell like, oh, wasn't this and this game done already, which sold this and this many copies? And you should know that. Feature list is also important for you and when talking to publishers, so everybody has an understanding like, are we looking to make a game for like 2 hours or 20 hours? Is it going to be like 20 levels or 200 levels? Is there going to be 5 different characters or 500 kind of things? The yellow boxes are the core of the game, and in the unique and monetization is your commercial potential. So you should have this unique aspect to make the publisher lose their mind, and the monetization is how you're going to make this game monetize, in case you're looking to make it in a business or running a business. And the gameplay is pretty much in the mechanics, goal, challenge part. So thinking of the goal and challenge and how those parts work. And then the gray one, there's a storyline, how you're going to incorporate the positive feedback, the visual style, a first level mock-up, which usually when paper, you can draw it on the other side. And quite often people have a vision of their game, thinking of their game, and then when they actually draw their first level, they realize like, oops, I'm missing quite a lot, and where does this and that go, and how does the score count, and that kind of things. But this is the tool it's available at gamedesigncanvas.org. It's available there for free, and you can even save it nowadays there. And here's also the canvas with the explanations on it. Yeah, and quite often if you have a box that's empty and not filled, that means trouble. If you're struggling on filling one of these boxes, that is usually trouble. It will show in the production or when looking to make this into a product at some point. That's pretty much the part I had. I don't know, can we take questions here? Does that work?
Doesn't seem to be any from the live chat. I do have a question.
We have a question. Yeah.
In the slide about the innovation and how you learned the hard way between you and old, what was the example?
Oh, you mean the game?
Yeah, can you elaborate on it? Like, what was so
Okay, I'm trying to remember what game. So the question was like, what was the game where I kind of redid everything and innovated everything? Yeah, I think it was a game where at the time there was Suma. Suma was quite popular, and we were looking to make a puzzle game, and I came up with this idea where when it had these bubbles which you would join, and usually that kind of game was played from bottom to top, and what I did, I made it so that you rotated the world. And I don't remember it exactly, but like that was already quite new and revolutionary. But then I also I played with everything possible, like the score counting, the economy, monetization model and everything. And and at some point, we realized like it needs to be scaled down a lot in that sense. Yeah. Can we have any other questions here?
I have another one.
Okay.
Waiting for one in the chat. So I'm curious about the target group bit. And like, I guess my question is, I can see the market research thing. I can see like these are examples that prove that there is an audience for the kind of game that you're making. How useful is it actually to have like a binary gender divide and say like, oh, I'm making this for 30 to 40-year-old males, as opposed to I'm making this for, say, casual players who play on their phone while commuting, doesn't matter what age or country.
It is very useful, and this will of course depend on your game genre and type. I mean, if you're making a first-person shooter, the target group is going to be somewhat different than the casual audience. And in some of these target groups, you can go quite specific on the age, and in some of these, you actually will have a wider audience. And like first-person shooters for males can be from 15 to 50 or so. And whereas some games are quite niche, and they are targeting for certain specific groups, and they identify like dog lovers are not served. So they might be providing a game especially for dog lovers, like a dog trimming simulator or something like this kind of thing.
Anyways, we have some chat questions.
Oh, okay. Is it here?
Starting from here.
Here. Okay, a bit more about the positive feedback session. So the positive feedback section is like whenever the player does what is expected. And usually the positive feedback is like, if the player fails a level, you can say like, you were really bad, you're not good at all at this, why are you even playing this? That is not supportive. You could say, okay, try again. That is like in the mid-ground, or you can say, you almost did it, I knew you will do it the next time. That is positive feedback. That is supportive feedback. Then also like, it's about all this bling. So when you press a button, stars will emit. They will transform. When you level up, there's stars flying, then confetti coming, and all these kind of positive indicators. Usually the animators and visual indicators and the supportive text kind of like make this positive feedback.
Yep, we have one more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So the question is about like using AI on making the game look and design canvas. I haven't tried that, so can't say I'll have to try and see what comes out of that. But I'd guess it will give you some overall results, which are not specific for a specific case, and for AI to understand the very core and heart of your game might not happen. So it can be helpful in giving direction, but I'm not sure it would solve your actual issue. All right. So I think next we could start with the workshop, next part, and start doing your canvases, right? So what I want you to do, and this emulates real-life situations. So as a game designer, I didn't get to choose. A couple of times I would work on the game that was based on my idea, but usually it would come from the product management, identifying like unserved groups, like the dog trimmers kind of things. And we would also have similar cases where crosswords, we would take a case of crosswords, making crosswords a casual game, and that was given to me as the assignment. So I'm going to give you a similar assignment you might get in a game company working on casual games. So what I want you to do is recreate this for me. So I want you to redesign Pong, and here is your targets for it. So it needs to be interesting. So whenever somebody sees that in the store, and of course you can check for reference, but it needs to be interesting, outstanding from all the other 50 or 500 different Pongs. The mechanics needs to be there, enough that we can call it Pong and identify it as a Pong, which basically means you're hitting a ball from one end to the other. I know not everybody can can keep to this and you want to go wild, and just go, be creative. But and then the target is for casual audience, and again you can go wild on that if you want to make a horror Pong, do that. But the most important thing is you should think of how to make this last for 6 hours. It's easy to make a Pong where you hit the ball for 6 hours. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for meaningful content and things inside the game to make it interesting. And this is where I want you to use the canvases. So next I'll go to the rooms over here, so I can give you more guidance on these. You can start working on these. And after lunch, we will check into the Pongs, and we'll start doing the fun stuff on working on those Pongs. Right? All right. Thank you. All right, I hope everybody had a good lunch and you're back in your positions. We'll go to the next round and we'll be hasty on this one. So you all worked on your Pong. I won't have time to go through individual Pongs, but that's not the point today. So what we're going to do, I'll show you some slides of what you could have done. You could have combined it with another game and had some features added to it, like multi-ball. Then you have breakable walls, so you have new elements. So this is all related to understanding the core components of the game, then adding new elements like power-ups, missiles. That's one part of the Pong, playing with the elements of it. Then you have new game modes, so you have breakable walls, you have collectible items, you change the level shape in various ways. That's one part of it. But then you could start working with the setting. So here's one example. So rather than having a ball, you have multiple ducks trying to eat buns, which you're blocking with your own boats. That's one approach of how to doing it. And or it could be termites eating the houses. And then you can add a story, which has chapters on how the story advances. So this is one example of how to advance it. But there's way more you can do. And there's a lot of things you can do, up to like character development, racket updates, changing the viewport, having various game modes. One of my favorites I always think about is anti-Pong. So you make the opposite of not hitting the ball, kind of thing. And then you have also all these kind of things like XP leveling up. So high scores, leaderboard, achievements. So there's a lot of stuff happening. And usually when I do this in game design course, what I do at this point, I take everybody's Pong and I put it in a big wall where we put all these features over there. And that simulates what happens in production. You're going to get those features from your fellow designers, team members, the producer, your design boss, your company management. If there's an external stakeholder, all of those will give you feedback on what should be in the game. And the result is like you have all of this for your game. And that simulates the problem you have of too much content, too many features, and in the end, where to focus. And that's the key of our second round, to look into where to focus. Here's a couple of other things you could add, like dairy awards and leaderboards. So next, what we're going to do, I think we're still looking to find paper and post-its. Hopefully we get those. If we don't, we'll have to be a bit creative. But what I want you to do is create teams. Ideally, you would all go into random teams, take a photo of the Pong you were working on. But you can also go in your pairs or stay in your team if you want, so you can have a little bit of freedom here. But the key thing is like you select one Pong out of all these Pongs and you start working on that. And be quick on this. Don't get too long stuck with this, because then what I want you to do is identify all the features in this Pong. And what I want you to do is put one feature on one, well, if it's not going to be a post-it, take a piece of paper, put one feature per one piece of paper, and then I want you to divide these. So you have the big papers in the rooms, divide that into 3 columns being core, extended, and wish list. So I want you to divide each feature into one of these categories. And the key why doing this is that everybody in that team understands that this feature is a core feature, this one is an extended. I've seen quite often people go into production and still some people are thinking a wishlist feature is a core feature and a core feature is a wishlist. So this is to clarify that. We'll give you about 40 minutes to do this. So form the teams, select the Pong, and then start identifying the features and put them one feature per one piece of paper and divide them to the core, extended, wish list. I'll now go to the rooms and see everybody knows what to do. All right, time is up. So hopefully by now you have come to a conclusion. What is your game idea? Made it into a full game or so with the sheets of the core, extended, and wish list. And I think every team did decide on the game, did have the features outlined. Some of you might be still doing the final details. But now we should have a game and the initial idea, what's the core of it? And what are the extended parts which we want to have in the release, and then wishlist everything else. And just as a note, you soon have your unique thing in the core, hopefully. And hopefully that was also in the canvas mentioned in the unique. But it's not uncommon that it happens that the unique stuff is not in the core or not in the mentioned in the canvas and the unique part. But this is kind of like, we're doing this. This is simulating real life. So let's say you have this game idea, being Pong today, you get somebody interested, so the investor might ask you to define like, what is this game actually about? Could you define it in more detail to give the understanding of like what's essential, what is not? So this is what we did on the first round. And naturally, as there's so many of you, we can't go through and present this, so we'll skip this part. And we will now, we have taken the game you have to the investor and shown it, pitched it, shown like this is the core of our game, this is the extended part of it, and this is what we hope to do if we have time. And now after doing that, we're going to get to the next round. And what we are doing today is like simulating the game production with all these features going around. And in the next rounds, we're going to kind of like do a crash course, what happens in game production. And this is very useful for you in a game jam because this will help you to understand where to focus and how to find where to focus. What is the key of your game? What is the core? But here's the first round of feedback from the investor. What is the feedback you need to do? So, he's happy with it, but he wants you to add storyline, the public level editor, and mini games included to the core, but you need to take 3 parts out of the core to replace them. If you have like storyline in the core already, then there's optional like Facebook leaderboard achievements and these kind of things. So you need to, but the key thing is you need to change 3 things in the core. Hopefully the ones he's requiring, or then the ones in the smaller box. But anyway, put in 3 of the things he demands and take away 3 things. So this is going to be your next round. You'll have about 10-15 minutes to do this. All right, so this round is done. And there's many purposes of doing this. So one thing, when you start working with publishers, investors, anybody funding your project, they're going to have something they want in the game. And no matter, I've lived this with achievements, in-ups, social features, NFTs, now it's AI. So there's always something that they want to have in the game, no matter if they understand it or not. One key thing here is that as a designer, this is something you need to get used to it. And why this can be difficult for some people is like you make your perfect game, you've figured it out, you've thought all out, and then comes this. And that breaks the game. And quite often, like, if you look at these things, storyline, public level edits and minigames, these are very different things. Storyline is a single player thing, it requires storyline puts in, level selection, unlocking system, XPs, this kind of stuff. Whereas public level editor is more like a multiplayer thing and requires like a community stuff. And minigames is yet again something different. So these are very different on purpose. But this is on the purpose that you understand that when these kind of things are required to your game, it can change your game quite a lot. So you need to also think of each one of these, how they would affect your game. Naturally, we here don't have that time to go into detail on that. But anyways, like on production-wise, if this is a requirement from somebody paying the salaries, it will mean something in the production has to change. Initial production plan can't hold all of this, something needs to be dropped out. And this is something that as a designer happens all the time. I have the priority list in my head of the features, what are in, how big they are, and if something like this comes up, I know what to drop, put into wish list and so on. So this is a constant thing that happens as a designer. It's something, first game, it will be horrible, it will be terrible to do, to change the brilliant idea, but the more you do it, the more used to you get into, and that's part of the professionalism. Another thing, I was to say something else, but yeah, that's basically the what we're doing this round. This might have been and in some cases, funny enough, what happens quite often in many teams. Some people feel like their game has gone ruined, it's gone from great to horrible, but it is not uncommon the opposite way, that people doing these things actually realize, hey, this is the part we were missing. Now our game has a cohesive meaning and now we should focus on that, or the initial idea we had now works really nicely. So what I'm doing as a point here also is like, you should play around with these. You should have a set of features and try them through in your game and see what fits and what doesn't. Because too often we get stuck with the initial idea we have and we just stick with that. But this was maybe a bit tough. I heard some people saying like, well, wait till the next round. The next round is going to be way more horrible. Ready? Here we go. So he wants now you to count all the nodes you have in core and extended. Out of that amount, take half out. And you can take away the things he wanted and insisted. So half away. All right, that was that round. We all hate him, right? That's horrible. But some good arguments about this is that the other option of doing it this way is not doing it and then not defining things as you go to production. What that means is along the way of the production you will encounter these things, but on the way there you'll probably argue, people will be in disagreement for ages because you haven't settled on what the game actually is. So when you do this in the very beginning, and you do it visually so that everybody sees what the game actually is, what is in the core, what is in the wish list, and so you actually have defined in the team what the game is, and then the ride there is smooth. So rather than going on an endless, bitter argument during the production of what the game actually is about, you can define it in the very beginning and make it visualize it to everybody what the game is. In real life, it never happens this extreme, but once I had, when we were making the mobile games, we had the case where one of the lead programmers was sick for a month. And that actually meant I had to cut about half of the game out. And that was horrible, but I had to do it. But things like this happen, so you might have to cut out things when things don't usually go on the schedule and so on. So this happens. And this should bring you clarity. So if you're thinking of going to the game jam, if you don't do this beforehand, then you will have to solve many things on the way, how they actually are, but you could clarify as much as possible in the very beginning. And this is a crash course we're doing today into this. We have 2 more rounds, and as we're running out of time, I'll just combine the 2 last rounds, and these are not bad at all in that sense. So now we have some extra time, so now we can add 2 more things into the core or extended. So you get to put them back. But this is very typical in an actual game production. Things move all the time. But sometimes things are cut out which affect other things. So remember the picture I showed in the beginning, how things are connected? That's related to this, on how these go. And this is kind of like what happens in my head when the production is going. So somewhere is this line. Okay, but the last, one other thing. We did this once, and usually you have too much stuff there when you're doing your game. You put everything you can think of in this feature list, and it's just too much. So you need to clarify that, and this is why we did this. And if we continue doing this rounds and rounds again, the last node you have should be your unique thing. And then another way to do it is start from the unique node and then build stuff around that. Then think like, does achievements work with this? Should I have missions? Should I have mini games, kind of thing? But the other thing after doing that too is like you have lots of extra nodes, so go and pollute others. So go and take your extra nodes and give them to other teams. Any random nodes you have left over or you don't like, give them to other teams. Go crazy. All right, thank you everybody. That was the last round. This last round actually happened by accident. I was doing the same in Malaysia and somebody just dropped some notes into other teams' work and turned up they were useful for them. So the funny thing about this round is it's random and somebody else's waste might be somebody else's treasure. And that kind of shows like how moving around with these features can result in unexpected results. But it also shows like we should really move around with these. So this has definitely been a very, very harsh crash course into this, how it goes. But like it gives you an idea on how to find a focus on the core of your game. So that's been the purpose of today. I'll stick around for a while if you want to have some more talks or questions, but thanks you for today.